I'm attorney Gregory Dell, and I'm here with attorney Rachel Alters. And Rachel, we're going to talk about applying for long-term disability benefits and short-term disability benefits with Unum Insurance Company. And this is a big one because Unum is the undisputed world's largest disability insurance company. They've reported profits of over $1 billion, not assets, profits. So. Right. They are very large. They've been around for a long time selling these policies, and in this video I want to give some people some tips about applying for long-term and short-term disability benefits. Also, obviously we've helped hundreds of claimants to apply, and it's a service that we offer. You don't have to have a lawyer, but I want people to understand what they're up against when they're applying and why it's important to get your claim correct right out of the box, as opposed to trying to backtrack and fix it later. Right. So let's start with, as the first thing, what do you think is the single most important thing when it comes to applying for disability benefits with Unum?
I do a lot of Unum applications, and I find that, and I tell my clients, the single most important thing is doctor support, because without doctor support, and that doesn't just mean your doctor's writing a letter saying that he believes you're disabled and can't work. That means that your doctor is documenting his or her medical records clearly, stating what your restrictions and limitations are, what your issues are, why it is you can't work, because Unum in particular is going to be looking at those medical records, and if you don't have a history with this doctor where he or she's documenting, they're going to say, well, this specific form that they filled out, either the attending physician statement or a letter, is not enough to get them approved.
Okay, so medical support is
key.
Gigantic. I mean, it's huge. And for people who are considering applying or maybe in the process already, that process is not something where, unless you had like a catastrophic accident or an accident where you broke something or you just got an unexpected diagnosis of some sort with no symptoms whatsoever, you've probably been suffering with your medical condition for years to months before, and you may or may not have had medical treatment. But if you haven't had any medical treatment and you just decide you want to file, is that a problem?
Yes.
Okay, and but why is that a problem for someone? Because they think, oh, well, I just went to the doctor one time and they said this is what's wrong with me. Would that generally be enough to get the person approved?
No. Time and time again, I tell my potential clients or my clients that they have to develop a history with a doctor, at least over a period of a few months, 3 months to 6 months, where there's documentation that you are seeing this physician or many physicians on a regular basis, so that they can see that, you know, you can't just go to the doctor one time, say, you know what, my back is in so much pain, I can't work anymore. They want to see that you've been treated, that you're following the treatment of the doctor, the recommendations of the doctor, and it's still not going away, whatever you're trying, whether it's if it's a back injury, injections or medications or physical therapy, that none of that's working, and you know, at this point, your doctors are saying you need to go off work. So if you've only seen the doctor one time, I try and discourage filing. The other issue I find a lot, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but if you file too quickly, there could be a pre-existing condition issue too. Yeah. If you haven't worked at your job for at least 12 months and you have a group policy with Unum, you got to be very careful, because even if you file a day early, they can deny your whole claim and for pre-existing, and there's really nothing we could do about it. So I try and say, call an attorney like myself, get some advice before you file the claim, because you can make a mistake such as that and then your whole claim is blown.
Okay, people who have the Unum coverage, either some of them didn't have to do anything and their employer just gave it to them. Some bought policies on their own or filled out an application, just, you know, basic info, and then they got the policy. And they unfortunately think when it comes time to apply that they're going to have their doctor fill out the form, and then the claimant's going to fill out their form, and Unum's just going to say, okay. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen that way, and people who have found our video have probably done other research and seen a lot of the stories out there, the hundreds of comments and reviews on our website about the experiences that people have had with Unum. So the key here is going to be being prepared. Now, take it a step further and let's talk about like getting advice from doctors. Doctors treat patients. They're not documenting the charts for the insurance company. So how do you advise your claimants to approach the doctor, or how do you work with the doctors to get the information the way in which you know that Unum's trained to look at the information?
Sure, and this can be a tricky thing because there are many doctors who are very willing to help their patients with disability claims, filling out forms, working with their lawyers, and then there's doctors who really aren't willing and don't want to fill out the paperwork and don't want to fill out the forms, and sometimes it takes the patient, talking to the doctor, sitting down with them, explaining to them that really without them they can't go on claim, and they're going to need their support. Sometimes they're going to get a hard no, and then we have to go find another physician possibly who will be willing to do this. But we do work with the claimant's physicians. We'll talk with them on the phone, we'll help them fill out the forms. If the forms the physician fills out is not up to par, up to our standards, we will contact that physician and have them redo it.
The other thing about the form is that Unum gives them a form that's very generic, doesn't leave a lot of space, and then often we'll do a custom attending physician statement where we'll make our own form and ask the doctor to answer specific questions related to the definition of disability. So whatever that person's occupation is, we'll ask some specific type things in that questionnaire, and whatever their medical condition is, we'll talk about the symptoms that are usually common for that type of thing, so that it's not generic and not just relying on the medical records that doctor's done, because these doctors don't document for insurance companies. And you talked about if you don't have a cooperative doctor. Now, do you think, the problem is you may like your doctor, but if they're not cooperative, you may have to switch doctors.
Of course.
And that can be challenging for somebody because they don't want to switch doctors. They like their doctor, but the doctor's like, I don't want to deal with the insurance company.
Right.
So another thing to be very careful of when applying this is that how often do you see that Unum goes ahead and contacts the treating doctor?
Very often.
And what's happening there? What should the doctor and the claimant be aware of?
It's really important for the claimant to notify the doctor that they have filed a disability claim, that it's very likely that the insurance carrier or one of their peer review doctors is going to contact the claimant's doctor and ask them a lot of leading questions, find out what's going on with the claimant, and if they catch the doctor off guard, a lot of times the doctor says things that can hurt the claim. So we want to make sure that your treating doctor is prepared that this call may happen. Oftentimes they'll call one time, leave a message, and then say they never heard back from the doctor, which does look bad for the claimant. They'll write it up in their denial letter. We contacted the doctor several times, and nobody called us back, so we're just going to go with whatever our own peer review physician's opinions are. So it's important to let the doctor know, hey, somebody's going to call. Could you call back, and could you, be very specific about what my restrictions and limitations are and why I can't work in this particular job.
Right, and a couple things that I would make sure the claimant tells their doctor. Number one is don't just take that phone call, cold call. Right. I would often recommend the doctor say that if they want to talk to you, that ask your doctor to have them submit those questions in writing. Right. They don't necessarily have to have an unrecorded phone call. It's not going to benefit the claimant because you don't know that the phone call is going to get documented properly.
Hardly ever is.
The other thing is that your treating doctor should be aware that you have a disability policy, that this is not Social Security disability. This is not your inability to do anything. This is likely, since you're filing, almost always the inability to do the duties of your occupation. And the doctor needs to understand it's not about activities of daily living. This is about you being able to go to work 8 hours a day, whether your job requires you to sit or if it's sedentary, light duty, medium duty, if it's a sitting job, that your doctor understands that this is about your ability to sit for 6 out of 8 hours of the day. Sometimes maybe it's even a threshold as low as 4 hours, right, without the need to lay down, take breaks. And you have to be a reliable employee that's going to show up for work 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, every day, not calling in sick this day, or I can't make this meeting, or I didn't have the opportunity to prepare last night because I was in so much pain and then I took meds. So doctors got to get the total picture that you have to be an all-in, committed, reliable employee 40 hours a week, and often the doctors don't realize that, and then they get a phone call from Unum or they won't fill out your forms. So that's all part of the education process that we work with you and work with your doctor to make sure they understand that. I want to talk about the process that I know that Unum's doing, and that is the immediate interview. As soon as you notify Unum, and you talked about timing also, because usually you have a 90-day or 180-day elimination period. Don't need to call them immediately.
No.
But what is that phone interview and why is that critical as well, and being prepared for that with Unum?
Sure. Once an application is filed for a short-term or long-term disability claim, Unum will contact either the claimant, or if you're represented by an attorney, they'll contact me and say, I want to do a phone interview. We always make sure that we are on that phone interview with the claimant and that we prepare the claimant for the phone interview ahead of time, because we know the type of questions that Unum is going to ask, and we want to make sure that you answer them the correct way, because the interview is being recorded, and it does make a difference in how they review the claim and whether or not the claim gets approved. So it's very important that you don't give too much information when you're asked the questions. You answer only the questions that Unum's adjuster is asking you. Don't volunteer information. Make sure that you're honest, but you don't want to say to them, hey, I could never ever sit more than 10 minutes at a time, because then what they do is they take everything you say in that phone interview and whatever you fill out in those forms, and then they will at some point possibly follow you with surveillance and catch you doing things that you claimed you never ever ever could do. So we don't like to say never ever. So we like to say, we can't sit for extended periods. We can't, we have to lie down often during the day, but we don't have to say, oh, I must take 7 naps during a day, because if you're caught not doing that, then that's how they get the claim denied. So it's very important to have representation during these phone interviews, because you do want to be prepared, and you don't want to say something that's going to be lethal to your claim.
And then often they're running video surveillance pretty quickly on the claim, so you got to be aware that they're going to start running video of you as soon as you notify them. And now that leads us into the timing of when you notify them, because sometimes the policy says notify us within 30 days of the claim. Right. You don't necessarily have to do that, especially if you have a 180-day elimination period and you're out of work now. You have to be out of work for 180 days before you're eligible. So why would you call them on day 30 or day 60? There's no obligation for them to pay you then, as all you're doing is getting them on your back and on top of you, and they're trained to try to get you back to work at all costs.
Right.
So we usually like to wait until maybe 30 days before the elimination period runs, or right when the elimination period runs, because they still pay you in arrears, which means they're going to pay 30 days after the benefits due, just like you work for your employer and then you get paid for the amount of time you work. They don't pay you until the time period is gone. So they always pay 30 days after, so that they're never going to be ahead of you. That being the case, timing is critical. Choosing a date of disability is huge.
Huge.
Something that you have to be extremely careful of, and it has to coordinate with your policy language, as you mentioned earlier, for pre-existing, and it has to coordinate with the medical records.
Right.
So how many claimants have called you where you go, I don't think we're ready to file yet?
Oh, many, because you also have to make sure that the date of disability that your doctor puts on the attending physician statement matches up with the day you stop working, because the doctor, say you stop working on August 1st and the doctor writes August 2nd as your date of disability, your whole claim is shot because you weren't disabled the day you stopped working.
Yes.
So this is extremely important, and I stress this so much with my claimants. Don't have your doctor fill out the form and send it right into the insurance carrier. Have a professional review it, because that also can blow your claim, and you can't backpedal and go, oh, just kidding, he meant this date, because oftentimes they won't accept it.
The other thing we know, because we've reviewed thousands of Unum claims, I mean, them being the biggest, it's obviously the most claims that we've reviewed, is that they have a process now for how they're reviewing the claims in the application. They're doing the initial phone interview. The next thing they're doing is they're immediately assigning it to a person who's a claim rep who's assigned to the claim. Then they're going to use all of their own internal resources. They're going to get their vocational consultant involved to evaluate your occupation. Then they're going to get their medical nurse consultant involved to review the entire claim to determine the restrictions and limitations.
Right.
And then they bring in a manager who's kind of like the person on top of the claim rep who's coordinating everything and calling the shots. But the manager is behind the scenes. You'll never know about that manager until later on if your claim's denied, and telling the claim rep what they have to do. And they have a forum meeting. They literally get together with these 4 or 5 people. They review your claim, and unfortunately, in my opinion, they come up with a strategy in terms of what's missing here. How can we prove that this claimant doesn't have enough information for a back condition or a knee condition or migraines or headaches, or whatever other condition
Sure.
you can have, and let's hire that doctor to review. Now the doctor's sitting there at the meeting. So of course the doctor, there's no independent review here. The doctor's being told, you need to review the records with an eye towards that this stuff isn't there.
Right.
And it's just not a way to get a fair review, and they're doing this process and they're getting away with it now. And you have to combat that with overwhelming supporting medical evidence and be aware that this is going on. So the disadvantage a claimant has in doing this on their own is that they don't know, they just don't know what they're up against, and they don't know what Unum's looking for. And I think that's where there's a huge advantage of trying to get all this information and avoiding these types of claim denials that we unfortunately often see. So obviously the types of medical conditions you have experience with, almost all of them is going to be a factor as to the type of evidence. There's also limitations in these policies that people need to be aware of. And just talk briefly about some of those that claimants should know so that they don't set themselves up to limit their benefit period right out of the box.
Right. Oftentimes I get calls from potential clients and they say, okay, you know, I have anxiety and depression, and it's severe, and my psychiatrist says that I can no longer work because of these issues, and you know, it's a slam dunk. I get that all the time. It's a slam dunk. I'm going to get approved, and and you know, these people may be in their 40s, and I'm going to be out of work till I'm 65, and I'm going to rely on this policy. And I say, hey, well, you got to be careful, because maybe 99% of these policies have a 24-month mental nervous limitation on them, which will only pay a mental nervous claim for a total of 24 months. So once that 24 months is paid, even if your condition is so severe and you could never work again in any occupation, you won't get another dime from Unum. So people don't really realize it because they don't read the policies. So this is one of those things that's you know, can be
and the
very problematic.
The reason they may be depressed or anxious is because of the pain in their back or their neck or their shoulder, or a combination of things that they actually haven't even treated for yet. And then come to find out, to say, you know, maybe you should go see a doctor for your back or whatever, get an MRI. That depression, that anxiety can be secondary to pain, and that's okay. That may not limit you to 24 months, but it's very hard to say, I'm primarily a mental nervous claim initially, and then I became physical. It certainly can happen within that 24 months, but it's a lot easier to present it, you know, so that you don't limit yourself to 24 months of benefits. The other thing that I just want to mention is the self-reported pain limitations and the musculoskeletal limitations that we're seeing in the Unum policies. What are those, and how does that limit benefits as well? Yeah,
unfortunately, these are showing up in a lot of policies, and again, most people don't read the policies in full and don't know that they exist. So what it is there's a 24-month musculoskeletal self-reported pain limitation in a lot of these policies, which essentially means if you have fibromyalgia, migraines, if you have back pain, but it's not associated with a radiculopathy or a myelopathy, which is something that's caused by nerve damage. If you have a lot of these self-reported things where you're going to the doctor and you're telling them, I'm in pain, I get migraine headaches 5 days a week, I have fibromyalgia pain, but there's really no objective test to prove that you have it. These are real conditions and they're disabling. Unfortunately, under these policies, they will only pay them for 24 months because you can't take a blood test. There's no X-ray or CT, you know, test or MRI that shows you have these. So in the insurance carrier's mind, you know, they're only going to pay these for 24 months. So we need to know about that right away. A lot of times when someone has back pain, they don't realize they have radiculopathy. So I will often tell them, go to your neurologist, go to your orthopedic doctor, mention this to them and ask them if you can have an EMG done. They're not the most fun tests to have. They are sometimes painful, but they will show if you have nerve damage, you can extend your claim to age 65 with this Unum policy. It's very important. So,
so you gave one example of one type of medical condition, but there's lots of testing that we can recommend that we know your policy needs, but your doctor didn't need because they were able to diagnose you and know what's going on, but that's going to limit the claim. And I know we could talk for hours about Unum, but just one other pointer I wanted to throw out in applying is that most of these policies have a definition of own occupation, and then they switch after 12 or 24 months to inability to do any gainful occupation. And if you're a person who thinks that you're not going to be able to go back to work at all in any capacity, then we want to establish your claim right out of the box for the unable to do any gainful occupation and not pigeonhole you into your own occupation,
right,
such that Unum may approve you for 12 or 24 months, but since you never bothered to establish to get through the second definition of disability, you're not in the best place and it makes that claim harder. Now, we've worked with people to try to make that transition, and we can still do it if you have months or years to go, but it's always better to do it right from the beginning. And a lot of people are going to see this video and say, I wish I found you before. That's fine, we can still help, but we want you to know there's lots of things, and don't just be lulled because your HR person said, here's your application, go ahead and apply. Right. So with regard to filing, we always offer a free initial consultation. We simply need a copy of your policy. We'll review it for you for free. We'll let you know how we think we can help you. We're not going to charge you any fees or costs unless we make a recovery for you. Our fees are flexible based upon your past and your future benefits. It depends upon how much your benefit is and how high the risk is in your claim. That's another thing we'll let you know right away. We help clients all over the country, no matter where you live. So I encourage you to give Rachel a call, myself, any of our lawyers. We'll talk to you right away, and we'll let you know if we can help you.